The question at hand is, as a society, are we becoming too politically correct? Recently, the topic of the Washington Redskins team name came up in the news once again when Phil Simms and Tony Dungy decided not to use the name Redskins when referring to the Washington football team. It made me wonder why so many people who are not Native American are jumping on the bandwagon to remove the Redskin name. I also wanted to know why there were not more Native Americans championing the movement when they were the only ones that should have any say about the term Redskin or the name of the football team. This brought up the topic of this commentary because in this case and many other cases the term Redskin is not being used in a derogatory way, and it would appear that many are taking up this cause to be politically correct, and not because they truly give a fuck. I have read both arguments as to what the true meaning of Redskin is, and in most cases it appears to have been used for both good and evil. Now, I am not Native American in lineage, so I can't offer my opinions on whether the name or term Redskin is offensive to me. However, at the same time, I am not overly sensitive about perceived derogatory names to my own heritage. I know what I know and I believe what I believe without being overly sensitive to what others deem as derogatory towards myself or my heritage. As a matter of fact, please feel free to call me whatever slur is being used for the Norwegian people these days. I agree that there have been many injustices against the Native American people, and that the term may have been used in a derogatory manner in the past, and most likely even now in some cases. This happens in every facet of humanity with race, ethnicity, sex, religion, every day, and it doesn't draw this much limelight a majority of the time. No one would care if the Redskins were owned by a Native American and he or she decided to keep the name. I have even found out that there are some Native American high school teams named the Redskins and no one is calling for them to be renamed. I come from the school of thought that one should speak their mind no matter if the topic is a sensitive one or not. Over the past 2.5 decades, maybe even a little longer as I'm only 37, the PC movement has gone into overdrive, with a large percentage of people, there always being exceptions to this rule, tiptoeing around in the way they interact with the world around them, both in speech and in actions. These people are constantly living in fear that they will inadvertently offend someone by being insensitive to their race, religion, sex, mental or physical state, age, or that they might upset someone's delicate palate of what is deemed as offensive subjects or language. For me, it is not much of a way to live, so I try to be as civil as possible without being overly PC. As this topic took form in my mind, I decided to look up the definition of politically correct on the interwebs, and these are two of the definitions I came up with. These definitions seem pretty straightforward to me. However, I sincerely believe that the politically correct movement has jumped the rails and encompassed much more than just matters of sex or race. Since our world is rarely black or white and contain many shades of gray, these actions are subjective to the groups that may potentially perceive a slight. And another definition, and one that I personally believe is much more appropriate to my discussion on what politically correct means, is from the Urban Dictionary's definition. This definition is of course the most politically incorrect and is also my favorite. Since we are currently having this discussion on YouTube, you most likely will have perceived that this phenomenon, aka political correctness, is a part of the community all the time. Commentaries avoid subjects and actions that could be deemed offensive to, insert group, race, minority, sex, age, physical, mental status here, and this phenomenon is not just contained on the internet. Every one of us has experienced this in our lives every day, and for most of us, the natural order of things is to let shit slide, or to put on a mask because we want to avoid offending anyone. Why is this the standard operating procedure, you may ask? It's because that is the way society has coined the sensible, correct thing to do, and most people plod along willingly. You don't confront the asshole in front of you in line at the supermarket, loudly talking into his phone. You, however, dream about telling him to hang up on his fucking phone because you don't want to hear him bitching to his wife about her asking him to get her tampons. You keep those thoughts bottled up because that wouldn't be civil, so you'd let it slide. When asked your opinion of the reason the United States is one of the most obese countries in the world, you don't speak your mind because it's not politically correct to say. That is because we're a bunch of fat fucking people who love to eat to excess and do not exercise enough. We also fail to mention the fact that we might offend poor Bertha, who is large because she has poor self-control when eating. But instead, the norm is to tell Bertha for her entire life that she is not fat and that she is just big boned. Some of us are intelligent enough and strong enough to handle the truth about ourselves, and that sometimes means that we are obese, aka fat, and that sometimes it's not a medical condition but a poor choice of how and what we eat. To this fact, I am obese and it pretty much sucks. I, however, am taking control of my problem, and I have owned up to the fact that I am this way because it was easy to become fat by making poor choices. Once this realization was made, and it was because I was offended, I chose to be more active and have taken steps to reduce my weight. Now, I've lost 22 pounds because of that. To me, politically correctness is just another way to censor people or to make them feel guilty while speaking their mind, or performing actions that are not malicious in intent or nature. There is a small minority that make it their personal crusade to be offended at everything and are usually the ones that are vocal enough to bring about change. I find that most people are not offended at every single little action or spoken word, and are most likely not going to complain every few seconds about shit that is just not important enough to be offended about. With this said, because most people are afraid to offend someone else, they inadvertently help spread the plague that is political correctness by asking themselves and others, would someone be offended by this? Inevitably, once people start watching this video, the content section below will have at least one negative comment supporting political correctness. This is the norm because people who think they are entitled to be offended all the time are usually the ones that will immediately let you know that they are ass hurt. I believe that most intelligent people realize the difference between people using actions, expressions, and languages in general terms to express a thought, idea, or a label in a productive, non-malicious manner are different from people using those same processes in a malicious, hurtful manner. In general, my thought is that there are times when you, as a human being, have to call shit how you see it, regardless of whether or not the action causes hurt. Sometimes, fat is just fat and is not big bone. Stupid is sometimes just stupid and not intellectually challenged. Bitch is sometimes just a bitch and not a female dog. I am a big believer of speaking my mind on subjects, and as far as I can tell, politically correctness is largely an excuse to make everyone feel good about themselves and an avenue to censor things that offend you or others during a daily routine. The problem is that there are exceptions to the rules, depending upon what group you're associated with. Example, refer back to my comments previously about PC being subjective to the group that is affecting it. If I am a black man, or African American using the politically correct term, and I use the N-word, it is a different meaning and is more socially acceptable to use. However, if I am a Caucasian, aka white guy, and I were to drop the N-word, I would be heralded as a racist and basically crucified. Seems a bit hypocritical, but that's a topic for another time. If as a male, I label a woman a bitch, I am frowned upon by other women. Sometimes women that don't even know the woman that I refer to as a bitch. However, when other women get together, they can and will use the term bitch as acceptable terminology for other women or themselves. Again, hypocritical. The flip side of this argument is that if a woman calls a man an asshole, he normally doesn't get his ass hurt as a woman does, because he has heard the term asshole from his buddies and usually isn't slighted by the term asshole when it comes from a female. Some groups are more sensitive to offense than others, which is a known common denominator in the politically correct world. As you can see from these two examples, politically correctness is subjective to the group or person who perceives the potential slight. If I find honky as a term of endearment or non-derogatory term, then I will not take offense to being called one. Thus, you don't have to call me a Caucasian while around me. However, my friend your ass is mine might take offense about that term, honky, and would rather choose to be called a redneck, of which I take offense, and so on and so on. You can see where this shit gets ridiculous. That is where we come up with terms like you're a bunch of assholes instead. If the politically correct initiative is not stopped or at very least reworked, we as humans may stop associating in any real meaningful way outside of our defined groups, be it race, religion, sex, age, or ethnicity. And because we as humans are afraid that we might inadvertently offend or belittle someone, this just might happen. A large part of our society is being governed by a small percentage of vocal, hypersensitive whiners that are easily offended. Most intelligent people with reasonable judgment can make the determination of when someone is intentionally trying to offend them and call bullshit. Most people end up governing themselves because the overly sensitive, offended people tend to voice every single little thing that offends them. This causes the biggest problem of politically correctness as I see it, and that is that a society is oversensitive to anything that might be offensive to anyone, even if the person or persons are offended or not. My personal belief is that sometimes being offended results in something good, and doesn't always have to have a negative outcome. I am also of the mind that not being offended once in a while perpetuates a false sense of correctness and entitlement. If everyone is always walking on eggshells, how the fuck will we ever learn conflict resolution and to think and express feelings for ourselves? I guess my point is that we shouldn't be walking around on eggshells all the time while trying to make sure that no one gets offended over every perceived slight. That we as a human race have much more to worry about than what a football team is named, or whether or not one race did something terrible to another race hundreds of years ago. While I am a big proponent of the adage we should never forget our past lest we become doomed to repeat it, I don't think it is necessary to continue to throw old past slights into the face of society and attempt to preempt all future slights with a doctrine like political correctness. We as humans need to stop dwelling on past grievances and put aside our differences to talk out what the issues are. We need to face our problems head on and with as much offense as possible to resolve our problem. We need to stop hiding behind politically correctness to avoid offending people, aka us, when many people need to be offended in order to address and correct current problem. I hate being called an asshole, but you know what they say, if the shoe fits.